And unfortunately, this was the news that dominated the weekend, and it was awful. And it involves a former NHL player, Adam Johnson, tragically killed in an on ice accident overseas. Adam played with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So why don't we bring in Josh Yohe, who, along with Rob Rossi, they did a fantastic job on the weekend, having to, tell a difficult story when a young man's life ends. Josh, thanks for joining the Monday podcast here.
Hi guys, good to see you both. Wish it was under better circumstances, of course. Just terrible, terrible weekend for the hockey world. No other way to put it.
Yeah, and I think what's important here is to look at the life of Adam and the impact that he had. And I know that you and Rob and other people have reached out to other people, and maybe just take a moment here to share with our listeners a little bit about Adam Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying to you if I said I got to know him super well because he wasn't in the NHL for that long. But he's just one of those kids that comes along. Everybody liked him. Just immediately likable, very kind young man. He was so happy to make it to the National Hockey League. I covered his very first game. I'll just never forget, even after the game, he still just had the big smile on his face. He couldn't get over the fact that he had made it. And I think he was one of those people who kind of willed his way to the NHL. He wasn't somebody that a scout looked at and said, "Oh, can't miss prospect." He wasn't that big or that fast, but he just worked his way there, and he finally made it to the NHL. And the only goal that he ever scored in his career was in Minnesota, in his home state with his family and friends there. I'll never forget it. He touched a lot of people in the short time he was here, and I know that just talking with some people over the weekend, from Jim Rutherford, his GM at the time, to Matt Cullen, who lived very close to him in Minnesota, really had a close relationship with him. Everybody was shook up, as you can imagine.
Is there a particular story from the ones you've heard over the weekend that stands out to you the most?
Oh boy, I mean, so for me, I already mentioned it, but the only NHL goal he ever scored coming in Minnesota, he was on the ice with Sam Lafferty and Zach Aston-Reese. That was the Penguins, and he played a lot of minor league games with those two. And I still remember seeing the smile on his face when he scored that goal. And Lafferty and Aston-Reese have both brought it up in the last couple of days. Like they will never forget the joy on his face. And he had a lot of friends and family in the building that night. You can't write it up. But you're going to score the only goal you're ever going to score in the National Hockey League, and it happens to be a road game in the city where you're from, or in the state where you're from, with your family there. That was just such of a touching moment. And he was one of those people. He just always had the smile on his face. I mean, I know we say that about a lot of people, but he really was one of those people. He was so happy to be in the NHL. And, even at almost 30, he was still playing hockey. He was just one of those people. He was a hockey lifer. It was the game he loved. And just left an impression on everybody. And I can tell you, from Sidney Crosby on down, all the people who played with him in Pittsburgh, they were hurting over the weekend. But in fact, the Penguins, they heard the news before their game Saturday against Ottawa, and they didn't know he had passed away yet, but they knew it was, grave condition, and it affected a lot of people, as you would understand, but that they had a real soft spot for him. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and I think what this has done, unfortunately, it's opened up a broader conversation here. We've seen it. Mark Lazarus had a piece in The Athletic. Chris Johnston has a piece that is coming out, and if it hasn't come out already, it'll be out by the time most people listen to this.
I think it just came out as you're talking about it.
Okay,
actually.
Well, there you go. And the topic is, are these types of on ice accidents, while extremely rare, are they preventable? And I'm wondering, Josh, like in kind of listening to some of the conversations that have been happening, do you think that this is going to push more professional hockey players, NHL players, to wear some sort of protection in and around their neck?
I will say this. I've covered this sport for a long time, as you two have also. I am astounded that this doesn't happen more often. I mean, how many times do you see a guy get checked and his feet go up in the air? It's always the first thing I think about. Where's the skate blade? I think the hockey world needs to have a discussion about it, in terms of the neck protection. I have a 9-year-old who plays. He wears one. I don't know why we stopped wearing them at some point when you think about it. I know guys don't like feeling restricted on the ice, but gosh, we went 100 years without people wearing visors. Like, was that very smart? I don't think so. There's nothing wrong with having a conversation about it. And I know that it's rare, but it did happen, and there was the Clint Malarchuk incident. He's very lucky to still be with us. think that was 1989. It's one of my first hockey memories. I'll never forget, that incident and how close he came to losing his life. There have been other incidents like this. So I think the hockey world's not always very good at, getting into incidents before they happen. But I'd like to see the hockey world be a little proactive about this one. I think it's worth having a conversation for everybody's safety.
And hockey manufacturers as well, who
Yes.
have made these neck guards as well. I mean, it seems as if people who have been asked about this, whether people who have not played at a high level or otherwise, they seem to say that comfort is a big reason why, or discomfort in this case is a big reason why they don't continue wearing these. Why are we at a point where neck guards, for whatever reason, are not that comfortable? I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to have this discussion in light of what happened this weekend, but maybe this is the catalyst for more innovation when it comes to that technology.
No, very well said, Julian. I agree with you. I mean, it's one of the most important parts on the body. Obviously, we're talking about hockey with people with ice skates on, and if you think about it, it seems obvious, doesn't it? But you talk with players over the years. I still remember in the early '90s seeing interviews with players. I don't like wear the visor. I can't breathe well enough, or it fogs up, or I can't see. And you're right. In 2023, I would hope we would have the technology where we could at least have the conversation, and even if it's not necessarily mandatory, at least give the players more flexibility if they want to try to wear it for their own safety. I think it's a really good idea. I do.
I remember, and Josh, you would remember this because it involved Erik Karlsson and Matt Cook, but that Achilles, Erik Karlsson had his Achilles sliced by the skateboard of Matt Cook. And it opened, if you recall at the time, a huge conversation about those sort of Kevlar cut-proof socks. And a lot of guys weren't wearing them at the time, and a lot of guys switched to them. I also think about Evander Kane. Remember, Evander Kane got his wrist pretty badly cut. Like, it's not just
Stomped,
the neck. It is other areas of the body where you could have a serious injury. And you wonder, like, how is it, not possible that there's that sort of Kevlar type of undercoating, so to speak, or under wear that the players could have, right?
No, there should be. I mean, I remember a couple of years before the Karlsson incident, PK Subban's skate went through the back of Jordan Stahl's leg, and he missed about, I think, 8 months or something. A very similar situation. And I remember very well the Karlsson Cook, and for all of Matt Cook's indiscretions over the years, that was a fluky play. And it's one of those things that happens. A lot of guys don't like wearing them. I've known enough hockey players over the years. They like to be comfortable. They don't like feeling restricted. And I get it. I'm not a hockey player myself, so I don't know what it's like to be on the ice and to feel a certain way, to have to operate at top level. But I think anybody's going to want to be safe out there, right? And I'm sure this incident, and you hate when it comes to something like this, but I'm sure it will open up some eyes, and some guys are going to be thinking, man, I got a family watching me out there every night. What can I do to make them feel a little more comfortable about my safety out there? Stuff like this does happen. We all know it. And you know what? Year by year, it's a cliche, but it's true. The game literally does get faster every year. It does. And 10 years from now, it's going to be even faster than it is now. And the faster it gets, the more dangerous in some ways I think it becomes too. So I think it's a great point that you both brought up about the technology, these companies that make, from the sticks, skates, you name it, all the manufacturers. I don't think anybody's blaming them or holding them accountable necessarily, but I think we need to sit down with them and say, hey, like, what's going on here? Why aren't things a little safer?
Here's another reason why I think we'll see some kind of change, because we've seen, you mentioned Clint Malarchuk. The one incident that stands out to me is Richard Zednik getting a skate to the neck as well.
That's
and
right.
That was really gruesome to see, but we didn't see anything immediately come from after that. If I'm not mistaken, Jacob Lauko a couple of weeks ago with the Boston Bruins, his eye was cut by a skate. But for whatever reason, we have not seen, whether at the professional, just pretty much anywhere at the professional level, up until this point, we had not seen the league kind of step up and say, okay, we are going to make these things mandatory. But Chris Johnston literally put out a tweet about half an hour ago about the English Ice Hockey Association saying that they're going to make neck guards mandatory for all players as of December 31st. And the only reason why it's not happening sooner is because of supply issues. And up until this point, unless I'm wrong, I can't think of any other pro league that has stepped up after an incident like this and said, okay, we are going to make neck guards mandatory. We know it's mandatory in the junior leagues, but I have not, and I could be proven wrong, please, but I have not seen a pro league step up and say, okay, we are going to make this a thing. And now that this league, where, I mean, I presume it's the federation that Adam Johnson was playing under because he was playing in the UK, now that they've stepped up and they've been proactive about this, how long until, you know, more people start making the point that the NHL needs to do? It's the highest league in the world for professional hockey league for professional hockey. They need to do something like this. I think at this point, conversations, we're having them now. We're having them on podcasts. We're going to have we've already seen think pieces come out about this. It almost feels like it's going to be inevitable at this point. That's how I see it.
Well, I think it's probably a matter of time, and this concerns the entire hockey world. I don't care what country it happened or who it happened to. The hockey community is a very tight-knit group, and this just so happens to be somebody that did play in the National Hockey League, who we do know him. And so maybe that makes it hit home a little more. But even if it had been a guy that we'd never heard of, I think we'd probably still be having this conversation. I hope we would. No, and I don't know how quickly it could be instituted, but listen, it's a conversation that needs to be had. Nobody's going to want their children playing a sport someday if safety precautions aren't being made. And I think hockey's been really guilty of that and really behind the times in a lot of ways for a long time. I mean, I'm old enough. I remember Craig McTavish playing without a helmet on. Like, I remember, think about it. It wasn't that long ago. I mean, it really wasn't. It's hard to imagine. Eddie Johnston still sits in the press box every night at Penguins games. He's 87 years old. Didn't even wear a helmet when he started as a goaltender. I mean, we're not that far removed from stuff like that. So
we still have players who go through warm up without helmets.
Right?
And I get that's not an actual game, but what's stopping an incident from happening where someone shoots a puck off someone's head in a warm up?
It's happened. I've watched it happen. Guys have gotten hit. A puck hits the crossbar, it ricochets, and it hits a guy in the head.
I can't remember who it was. I remember years ago in warm-up, somebody, I think, collided and somebody fell and hurt their neck or something in a warm-up. I forget who it was. But no, there are always, it seems like 4 or 5 guys on every team that don't wear their helmet during warm-ups. It drives me crazy. It really does, because you're right. We all see it at games. Pucks hit crossbars. They ricochet everywhere. You don't know where they're going. I mean, you're taking a chance. It's just not a good look.
And I get there's a measure of risk that has to be taken whenever you do anything in life. And in hockey as well, like, you can protect yourself as much as you can. People will still get hurt. But you do bring up a good point. Like, we're in the 2020s now. We're not in the 1980s anymore where, people could fight off the idea of wearing a visor or a helmet. Like, I think if the precautions and the concepts are there for people to protect themselves, shouldn't these players be in that position to do that?
Yeah, and I would honestly, I'd like for the Players Association maybe to take the lead in this, because the National Hockey League itself has told us enough in the last few months with many decisions they have made. I don't even know what's going on with the league right now, but clearly they're not on the same page as most people. And I would love for the Players Association to kind of stand up and say, hey, you know what? This league exists because of the players, and we're going to try to set an example for all the younger people playing out there and keeping our own players healthy, and maybe have a conversation about this. I really think it would be appropriate at this point in time.